forced to marry her stepsister's alpha king. She never knew he'd always wanted her. Hello everyone. Before we step into today's story, I have one small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story from our channel. It only takes a moment, it is completely free, and it helps us continue bringing you powerful, dramatic, and emotional stories of love, courage, sacrifice, and destiny. Your support truly means the world to us. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and what time it is where you are right now. We love seeing how far these stories travel and discovering who is joining us from across the world. Now, settle in and stay with us, because today's story begins with a young woman forced to take her stepsister's place beside a powerful alpha king, never realizing that she was not his second choice at all. She was the woman he had wanted from the beginning. Now, let's begin today's story. Send the other sister. The words arrived less than an hour before Vivian Whitmore was supposed to leave for Blackthorn Citadel, and Elena could not understand why the Alpha King had written them. Until that moment, the Whitmore estate had been drowning in panic. Vivian's wedding gown remained spread across a velvet chair, untouched, while her bedroom window stood open to the cold morning air. On the dressing table lay a single letter. I will not marry a man I do not love. Do not follow me. Lady Margaret Whitmore read it twice before turning toward Elena. You will take her place. Elena stared at her stepmother. He is expecting Vivian. He is expecting a daughter of this house. Margaret's voice was controlled, but fear showed beneath it. The marriage treaty protected Whitmore territory, including dozens of farming families who depended on royal trade routes and winter grain reserves. If the agreement collapsed, powerful neighboring pacts could challenge their claims before the royal council. Elena understood the danger. She also understood something colder. For 22 years, Vivian had been prepared for importance. She had studied royal etiquette, ceremonial history, and court traditions. Elena had learned inventory ledgers, tenant disputes, harvest schedules, and how to stretch grain supplies through a difficult winter. No one had ever called those royal skills. You want me to walk into his palace wearing my stepsister's wedding dress and hope he accepts the deception? Elena asked. Margaret looked away. That was answer enough. Elena crossed to the window. Beyond the estate, nearly 15 miles of Whitmore farmland stretched toward the pine-covered hills. Families lived there. Children, elderly couples, people who had nothing to do with Vivian's decision. Elena could refuse. Part of her desperately wanted to. Then horses approached the front courtyard. Minutes later, a royal courier entered carrying a black envelope sealed with the silver wolf of House Blackthorn. Margaret broke the seal with trembling fingers. Her face changed as she read. What is it? Elena asked. Margaret said nothing. Elena took the letter. The message was brief. King Adrian Blackthorn had already been informed that Vivian would not honor the arrangement. There was no anger, no threat, only one instruction written in the Alpha King's own hand. If Vivian refuses, send the other sister. Elena read it again. Then once more. The other sister? She whispered. Margaret seemed equally unsettled. Elena had met countless officials from Blackthorn territory, but she had never been formally introduced to the king. As far as she knew, Adrian had no reason even to remember her name. Yet the letter had not said cancel the wedding. It had not demanded an explanation. It had asked for her. A strange uneasiness settled beneath Elena's ribs. She looked toward Vivian's abandoned gown, then back at the royal message. For the first time that morning, being the replacement frightened her less than another possibility. Perhaps King Adrian Blackthorn did not see her as a replacement at all. Elena did not wear Vivian's wedding gown. That was the first decision she made for herself. If I am going to stand before the Alpha King, I will not arrive disguised as someone else, she told Margaret. By noon, Elena had chosen a simple ivory traveling dress and packed only what belonged to her. As the carriage carried her away from Whitmore Estate, she watched familiar farmland disappear beyond the window and wondered what kind of man specifically requested a woman he had supposedly never met. The question followed her through every mile of forest. Elena had spent most of her life standing just outside the rooms where important decisions were made. Vivian received tutors in diplomacy and court etiquette while Elena worked beside the estate steward. She knew which tenant families needed extra grain after a poor harvest, which bridges flooded during spring rain, and why numbers written neatly in a ledger rarely told the entire truth about the people behind them. 3 winters earlier, that knowledge had led to one of the strangest conversations of her life. A traveler had arrived during a heavy snowfall, dressed in a plain dark coat, and introducing himself only as Adrian. Elena assumed he was a royal surveyor. She found him studying tax records in the estate office and asked why Blackthorn officials expected struggling northern farms to pay the same winter levy as wealthy southern territories. The law applies equally, he had replied. Elena remembered placing a ledger before him. Equal is not always fair. The stranger had raised an eyebrow. Explain. Most men of rank disliked being challenged. This one listened. Elena showed him harvest figures, transportation costs, and the difference between families who had savings and families deciding whether to buy seed or heating wood. A law is not wise merely because powerful men signed it, she had said. The stranger studied her for a long moment. And what would you change? Elena proposed a seasonal tax scale based on harvest conditions. He asked questions for nearly an hour. Then he thanked her and left before sunrise. 2 months later, Blackthorn Kingdom unexpectedly reduced winter levies across several northern territories. Elena had wondered about the coincidence, then forgotten it. Now, as Blackthorn's citadel appeared beyond the mountains, memory returned with uncomfortable clarity. Dark stone towers rose above the forest, silver banners. Moving in the afternoon wind. Elena leaned closer to the carriage window. Adrian. She whispered the name once. Surely it meant nothing. Adrian was common enough among noble families. Yet she remembered the stranger's steady silver-gray eyes and the way everyone at Whitmore Estate had seemed strangely careful around him. Her heartbeat quickened. At the citadel gates, an elderly man in royal robes waited to receive her. Lady Elena Whitmore, he said warmly. I am Elder Gideon Vale. Elena stepped from the carriage. Does the king know I am here? Gideon's expression carried the faintest hint of amusement. His Majesty knew when your carriage crossed the northern bridge. Elena hesitated. Was he expecting my stepsister? Gideon studied her as though deciding how much he was permitted to reveal. The royal council was expecting Lady Vivian. And the king? Gideon glanced toward the highest palace window. A solitary figure stood behind the glass, watching the courtyard below. Even from that distance, Elena recognized the broad shoulders and long dark hair. Then the figure stepped into the light, and she saw those unmistakable silver-gray eyes. The traveler from 3 winters ago had never been a royal surveyor. Elena stopped breathing for one startled second. Gideon followed her gaze. The king, he said quietly, has been expecting you for much longer than today. Elena recognized him before the palace attendants finished opening the carriage door. 3 winters had changed Adrian Blackthorn in ways that made his true identity impossible to miss. The plain dark coat was gone, replaced by formal black and silver, and the quiet traveler who had once listened to her argue about winter taxes now stood beneath the carved arches of his own citadel with the unmistakable authority of a king. Yet his eyes were exactly the same. Silver-gray. Steady. Watching her, as though this moment had been delayed rather than unexpected. Elena entered the Moon Chapel an hour later wearing an ivory gown chosen for her, not Vivian. When an attendant offered the traditional bridal veil, Elena gently refused. If the king intends to reject me, he will reject the woman standing before him, not a face hidden beneath my stepsister's ceremony. Gideon heard her and almost smiled. The chapel doors opened. Nearly 200 nobles turned toward Elena. Whispers followed immediately. That is not Vivian. They sent the Omega sister. Does the king know? Elena heard enough to understand what everyone expected. Humiliation. Anger. Perhaps an immediate cancellation of the treaty. She kept walking. At the far end of the chapel, Adrian stood beneath the ancient moon arch. His long dark hair rested against the collar of his ceremonial coat, and a silver crown caught the pale light above him. Elena searched his expression for surprise. There was none. She stopped several feet away. For one long heartbeat, neither spoke. Then Adrian's gaze softened. At last. The words were quiet, but the chapel was silent enough for them to travel. Elena stared at him. At last. A councilman shifted uncomfortably nearby. Adrian ignored him. You remember me. You told me you were a traveler. I told you my name was Adrian. Elena almost laughed from disbelief. You neglected the part about being king. You would have treated me differently. I would have known whose tax policy I was criticizing. A faint smile touched his face. That was precisely what I wanted to avoid. The warmth in his expression unsettled Elena more than anger would have. She lowered her voice. Did you know Vivian was gone before you sent that letter? Yes. And you asked for me? Yes. No hesitation. Elena looked toward the gathered court, then back at him. Why? Adrian's eyes held hers. That answer deserves more than a sentence spoken for an audience. The officiant stepped forward, clearly eager to restore order. Your Majesty, shall we proceed? Elena's stomach tightened. Everyone expected her to say yes, because Whitmore territory needed this marriage. Because she had been sent here. Because kings were not supposed to wait for omegas to decide. Elena looked at Adrian. Not yet. The chapel went still again. I will not stand at this altar believing I am a convenient substitute for my stepsister. Several council members exchanged alarmed glances. Adrian did not appear offended. Instead, he stepped away from the altar, removing himself from the position of authority above her. Good, he said. Elena blinked. Good. I would rather postpone a kingdom's ceremony than begin a marriage with you believing a lie. He reached inside his ceremonial coat and removed a folded copy of the original Whitmore Treaty. Adrian opened it to the marriage clause and held it where Elena could read. The wording was unmistakable. The crown requested marriage with a daughter of House Whitmore. No name appeared anywhere. Elena slowly looked up. You never asked for Vivian. No. Then why did everyone believe you did? Adrian glanced toward the royal council. Because they chose the daughter they considered suitable. His gaze returned to Elena. I chose my words much more carefully. Elena felt the strange second meaning immediately. Why? Adrian folded the treaty. Because 3 winters ago, an omega in a little estate office told a stranger that equal was not always fair. His expression softened, and I have been trying to find my way back to that woman ever since. For several seconds, Elena forgot the nobles were watching. Adrian's confession should have made everything simpler, yet it created a question she could not ignore. If he had wanted her for 3 years, why had he allowed everyone to prepare Vivian for the marriage? Elena looked at the treaty in his hand. You knew who you wanted, but you never asked me. Adrian's expression changed. The warmth remained, but certainty left it. No, he admitted. Why? Elena asked. Because I believed you wanted a life far from court. You cared about farms, families, and people who would never enter a royal hall. I thought bringing you here would take you away from everything you valued. Elena held his gaze. So you made that decision for me. The words were gentle, but they landed exactly where they needed to. Adrian lowered the treaty. Yes. Around them, the chapel remained silent. Elena realized something important. A man could care deeply and still be wrong. Love did not become wisdom simply because its intentions were kind. I came here because my family told me the territory depended on this. Marriage, she said. I will not exchange one person's decision for another. Adrian nodded slowly. Then tell me what you need. Elena had not expected the question. She looked toward the representatives from distant packs, then toward the council members who had assumed Vivian was the proper choice because she had been trained to stand beside a throne. If I marry you, I will not spend my life smiling at ceremonies while other people decide what happens beyond these walls. I want a seat in councils involving food reserves, tenant protections, trade routes, and winter relief. Several nobles reacted immediately. One councilman stepped forward. Your Majesty, those responsibilities have traditionally belonged to appointed ministers. Elena turned toward him. Then appointed ministers should not fear one more informed voice. Adrian almost smiled. Agreed. The councilman stared at him. Your Majesty. She asked for responsibility, not decoration, Adrian replied. I see no reason to refuse. Elena studied him carefully. And if I disagree with you? I expect you will. Publicly, a quiet ripple moved through the chapel. Adrian's answer came without hesitation, especially when it matters. Something inside Elena softened, though she refused to mistake possibility for trust. She stepped toward the moon arch, then we may proceed. The ceremony that followed was simpler than the court had planned. Elena made no promise of obedience. Adrian made no claim of ownership. They promised honesty, protection, and the freedom to speak truth even when truth was uncomfortable. When the officiant declared their union recognized by the crown, moonlight passed through the chapel windows and briefly touched Elena's hands. She felt an unexpected warmth beneath her palm. It vanished before she could understand it. Later that evening, after the guests moved into the banquet hall, Elena wandered through a quiet corridor lined with portraits of former rulers. Adrian had been called away by the council, leaving her alone for the first time since arriving. At the corridor's end stood an old stone door carved with two parallel paths beneath a crescent moon. Elena paused. Something about the symbol felt strangely familiar. She reached toward it. The instant her fingers touched the stone, silver light traveled through the carving. Elena pulled back in surprise. The door opened several inches on its own. Beyond it lay darkness and the faint scent of ancient paper. "That is impossible," a voice whispered behind her. Elena turned. Elder Gideon stood several feet away, staring not at her, but at the glowing symbol. His face had lost all color. "What did I do?" Elena asked. Gideon approached slowly. "That seal has not answered anyone in 891 years. Elena looked back at the two illuminated paths. "What does it mean?" Gideon's eyes settled on her with something between wonder and fear. "It means, Your Majesty, that the king may not be the most important reason you were brought here." Elena should have called for Adrian before stepping through the ancient doorway. Instead, curiosity carried her forward. Gideon followed with a small lantern, though silver light already traced the walls beyond them. The hidden chamber was narrower than Elena expected, lined with shelves of sealed manuscripts and stone tablets covered in symbols she could not read. At its center stood a circular pedestal bearing the same image carved into the door, two paths running side by side beneath a crescent moon. "What is this place?" Elena asked. Gideon moved carefully between the shelves. "A forgotten branch of the royal archive. I knew references to it existed, but I believed the chamber had been lost during palace reconstruction centuries ago." Elena approached the pedestal. "And the seal?" Gideon hesitated. According to surviving records, it opened only for women carrying a particular gift. Before Elena could ask more, footsteps sounded in the corridor. Adrian appeared in the doorway, concern crossing his face when he saw her inside. "I leave you alone for 20 minutes, and you discover a room my archivists missed for 8 centuries. Elena glanced at him. "Perhaps your archivist should spend less time agreeing with kings." Adrian gave a quiet laugh, then noticed Gideon's expression. "What happened?" Gideon pointed toward the glowing pedestal. "She awakened the Pathkeeper seal." Adrian's amusement disappeared. "Pathkeeper," Elena repeated. Gideon opened a fragile manuscript stored beneath a protective cloth. The word appears in the oldest Blackthorn records, but most references were removed from later histories. He carefully turned several pages until an illustration appeared. An ancient Alpha King stood beneath a moon arch. Beside him stood an Omega, not behind him, and two silver paths extended beneath their feet. Elena leaned closer. Below the image was a title written in an older form of the royal language. Gideon translated slowly. "Stepsister of the Crown." Elena frowned. "Stepsister? Not in the modern family sense," Gideon explained. The original phrase meant one who steps beside the crown. Someone who walks the second path alongside the king. Adrian studied the illustration. "Why would that title disappear?" "I do not know." Gideon looked toward Elena. "But the women who carried it were said to possess something called the Pathkeeper gift." Elena felt warmth gathering in her palm again. "What kind of gift?" "The records are incomplete." Gideon turned another page. Most of it had faded, but one sentence remained. "She does not see tomorrow. She sees where today's choices may lead." Elena stared at the words. She remembered moments throughout her life when decisions had seemed to unfold inside her mind as branching consequences. When estate managers saw a shortage, Elena saw which families would suffer first. When officials changed a tax, she imagined what farmers would sacrifice to pay it. She had always believed it was simply careful reasoning. "You are saying that is supernatural?" "Perhaps not entirely," Gideon replied. "The gift may strengthen wisdom rather than replace it." Adrian looked at Elena with wonder, but she immediately noticed something in his expression. "Do not," she said. "Do not what?" "Start believing this makes me more worthy of standing beside you." Adrian understood instantly. "I already wanted you before either of us knew this room existed." Elena held his gaze, then nodded. That answer mattered. Suddenly the pedestal brightened beneath her hand. Silver lines spread across its surface, forming a map of Blackthorn Kingdom. One path divided into dozens. Elena gasped as impressions entered her mind. Empty granaries, crowded roads, peaceful villages, closed mountain passes, choices leading toward consequences she could feel but not fully see. Then every path vanished except two. One glowed silver. The other disappeared beyond the northern mountains into a region missing from every modern map. Gideon stared at it. That territory has no name. Elena felt a quiet warning settle beneath her ribs. It did once. Adrian stepped beside her. How do you know? Elena looked at the forgotten road glowing beneath her fingertips. She did not know the name of the lost land, but somehow she understood one thing with absolute certainty. Because something there remembers us. Elena barely slept that night. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw silver paths branching across the ancient map, each one carrying a different consequence. By morning, Gideon had gathered every surviving reference to the Pathkeepers, and Adrian joined them in a private library overlooking the eastern gardens. Sunlight filled the room as Gideon placed 3 fragile manuscripts on the table. The gift was never prophecy, he explained. A Pathkeeper could not predict exactly what would happen. She sensed the likely consequences created by choices already available. Elena studied an illustration of an omega standing beside an ancient king. Then why call it a gift? Good advisors consider consequences. Exactly, Gideon said. That may be what made Pathkeepers unusual. Their ability did not replace judgment. It deepened it. Adrian leaned over another manuscript. And they were always omegas? According to these records, yes. Rare ones. Perhaps one in many generations. Gideon pointed to the old title. They stood beside Alpha Kings because power naturally asks what can be done. A Pathkeeper was expected to ask what should be done, and who would carry the cost afterward. Elena felt something inside those words settle into place. Her entire life, people had mistaken her habit of considering consequences for hesitation. Vivian had once teased that. Elena could turn a simple decision into 10 questions. Perhaps Elena had never been indecisive. Perhaps she had always sensed that every choice created a road someone eventually had to walk. Adrian watched her quietly. What are you thinking? That wisdom sounds much less impressive when you describe it honestly. How would you describe it? Elena looked toward the window, paying attention before consequences force everyone else to. Adrian smiled faintly. That sounds impressive enough. Gideon continued reading. The Pathkeepers had once advised on harvests, migration routes, treaties, and laws. Then, almost 900 years earlier, references to them abruptly ended. No explanation. No final record. Only absence. Elena touched one faded page, and warmth moved through her fingertips. For an instant, possibilities unfolded before her. She saw Adrian announcing her gift publicly. All followed, then expectation. Every disagreement became a demand for Elena to reveal the correct path. Every mistake became proof that she had failed. Another possibility appeared. Adrian could hide her gift completely. Safety followed, but so did secrecy, suspicion, and another generation built around buried truth. The impressions disappeared. Elena drew a slow breath. Adrian noticed. You saw something. Possibilities. She explained both paths. Neither feels right. Adrian considered this instead of offering an immediate answer. Then perhaps there is a third. Elena looked at him. You believe that. You taught me equal is not always fair. I am beginning to suspect 2 choices are not always the only choices. Elena smiled despite herself. Together, they decided the kingdom would learn that the archive had reopened, but Elena's gift would not become a spectacle or an oracle. She would serve openly on the council because of her judgment, not because people believed she could solve every problem through magic. As Gideon gathered the manuscripts, Elena noticed a final line hidden along the bottom of one page. The ink was nearly invisible. She read it aloud. When the 2 paths become one, the great divide approaches. Adrian's expression sharpened. The map last night showed 2 paths. Yes. Elena remembered the nameless road beyond the northern mountains. At that moment, a royal messenger entered carrying reports from the northern packs. 3 major mountain routes had become unexpectedly impassable after unusually early storms, threatening winter food shipments. The council was already demanding that all remaining supplies be redirected toward the capital. Elena touched the report. Silver paths immediately unfolded across her mind. One led toward a protected capital and desperate northern villages. Another led toward shared shortages across the kingdom. Then, between them, a third path slowly appeared. Elena looked at Adrian. Call the council. He studied her expression. You found another choice? Elena rose. No. Her voice was calm. We are going to build one. The council chamber had been designed to make uncertainty feel unwelcome. 12 high-backed chairs surrounded a long oak table, maps covered the walls, and generations of alpha leaders stared down from painted portraits as though every difficult question should already have an answer. Elena entered beside Adrian carrying the northern reports. Several council members looked surprised to see her. One looked openly doubtful. Your Majesty, Minister Caldwell began. The capital holds enough grain for approximately 10 weeks. If the mountain routes remain closed, we must secure those reserves immediately. And the northern packs? Elena asked. Caldwell glanced toward her. They have local stores. For how long? Silence followed. Elena placed the reports on the table. 3 weeks in Pine Hollow. 4 in North Ridge. Less than 2 in smaller settlements above the Eastern Pass. Another minister frowned. Redirecting capital reserves risks shortages here. I know. Elena closed her eyes briefly. The Pathkeeper sense stirred, not as a vision of the future, but as consequences unfolding from choices already present. She saw a protected capital surrounded by communities losing trust in the crown. Then she saw grain distributed without planning, leaving everyone vulnerable before winter ended. 2 roads. Both carried a cost. Adrian remained silent. He did not ask Elena for prophecy. He waited for her judgment. She opened her eyes. We are asking the wrong question. Caldwell leaned back. Which is? We keep asking who should receive the existing grain. We should ask how to move more food while the main roads are unavailable. Elena walked to the map. The Western River remains navigable for another 6 weeks. Barges can carry supplies to Greyhaven. From there, smaller wagons can use the lower forest road into the northern territories. That adds nearly 40 miles, someone objected. Yes, but the road is open. Elena pointed to 3 farming districts south of the capital. These regions reported harvest surpluses. Offer temporary tax credits for grain sold into the relief program. Release 1/4 of the Royal Reserve now, then replace it with southern purchases as they arrive. Distribute northern shipments according to population and remaining local stores. The room grew quiet. Adrian studied the map. The capital keeps sufficient reserves. Northern packs receive immediate relief. Farmers receive compensation instead of forced requisition. Elena nodded. No one gets everything they want. That is different from making one group carry the entire cost. Caldwell examined the figures again. It could work. Adrian looked around the table. Then we begin today. He did not say it was his plan. He did not soften Elena's contribution into a suggestion from the crown. Lady Elena designed the response. Give her the personnel and records she requires. For the first time, the council looked at her not as Vivian's replacement, but as someone whose judgment belonged in the room. Hours later, Elena found Adrian alone on a balcony overlooking the valley. Snow clouds gathered beyond the northern mountains. You could have ordered them to accept my plan, she said. I could have. You did not. Adrian turned toward her. You did not need me to make your reasoning stronger. Elena studied him, remembering the man who had quietly changed a tax policy after listening to an unknown omega-3 winters earlier. Why did you never come back? Adrian's expression softened. Because I wanted you, and I convinced myself staying away was kindness. Elena waited. I thought court life would take something from you, he continued. I thought choosing you without asking would be selfish. So instead, I made another choice without asking. Elena almost smiled at the contradiction. Adrian did not. I was wrong. Wanting someone does not mean knowing what is best for them, she said. I know that now. The honesty between them felt quieter than romance and stronger than flattery. Then Elena's palms suddenly warmed. Across her mind, the silver paths returned. The Northern Relief Plan branched into dozens of hopeful possibilities. But beyond them, one darkened region remained untouched. The land missing from every modern map. This time, a single silver path led directly toward it. Elena turned toward the mountains. Adrian followed her gaze. What do you see? Elena felt the ancient Pathkeeper warning settle inside her. The problem we solved today was not the Great Divide. Her voice lowered. It was the first step toward it. By the following afternoon, The first grain barges were already moving north along the Western River, and Elena discovered that solving one crisis had changed something more important than the council's opinion of her. It had changed the way Adrian listened. He no longer asked what her gift predicted. He asked what she thought. That difference mattered. Elena stood with him and Gideon inside the hidden archive, studying the ancient map beneath the Pathkeeper's seal. The nameless territory beyond the northern mountains remained dark, but a thin silver road now connected it to Blackthorn Kingdom. There must be records of this region somewhere, Adrian said. Gideon opened another sealed manuscript. If there are, someone worked very hard to separate them from the royal histories. Elena placed her palm near the map without touching it. Warmth gathered beneath her skin. The Pathkeeper's sense opened gently. She saw choices rather than events. One path showed Adrian sending royal officials north immediately. Suspicion followed. Another showed the kingdom ignoring the forgotten territory. The silver road faded, and something valuable disappeared with it. Then a third possibility formed. But it depended upon trust between people who did not yet know each other. Elena withdrew her hand. The gift never gives me an answer, she said. It gives me consequences. Adrian stepped beside her. Then what does your judgment say? Elena looked at him, grateful he had learned to ask that question. That we should learn why this land was erased before we decide what to do about it. Gideon suddenly stopped turning pages. I found something. He held up a fragment bearing the same two-path symbol as Elena's seal. Beneath it was an older inscription. Gideon translated slowly. When the kingdom forgets those beyond its sight, the road divides. When the crown walks without its second step, the divide grows. Adrian frowned. The second step means the Pathkeeper. Possibly, Gideon said. Elena studied the words. Or it means the principle behind the Pathkeeper. Power considering the people who carry the consequences. Adrian looked toward her. That interpretation seemed to affect him more deeply than any prophecy. That evening, the Northern Relief Council gathered again. Reports confirmed Elena's plan was working. The capital retained adequate reserves. Southern farmers had begun selling surplus grain into the program, and northern communities were receiving scheduled deliveries. Minister Caldwell rose before the council. Lady Elena's solution prevented us from choosing between protecting the capital and abandoning the north. Elena shook her head gently. We did not avoid a choice. We made a better one because we stopped pretending there were only two. Adrian's eyes met hers across the table. Pride was there, but not possession. After the meeting, he asked Elena to walk with him through the moonlit courtyard. The council wants to formally recognize you as Luna tomorrow, he said. Elena slowed. Because of the Pathkeeper gift? No. Adrian's answer was immediate. Because you are already doing the work they believed only a perfectly trained noblewoman could do. Elena smiled faintly. Vivian was perfectly trained. For the court, Adrian said. You trained yourself for people. They stopped beneath an old stone arch. Adrian did not reach for her. 3 years ago, I wanted the woman who challenged me in an estate office. Now I understand something I did not understand then. What? Wanting you was never enough. I had to learn how to stand beside you without deciding your road. Elena felt warmth rise beneath her palm. This time it was not warning. The silver paths appeared briefly in her mind. Dozens of possibilities flowing forward. Then, one by one, they converged toward the forgotten northern territory. Elena's smile faded. Adrian. He saw the change immediately. What is it? She closed her eyes. For the first time since her gift awakened, the Pathkeeper sense showed no alternatives. Every road became one. Beyond it stood a distant mountain valley hidden beneath silver mist, and an ancient symbol waited at its center. Elena opened her eyes. Gideon's warning returned to her with terrible clarity. When the two paths become one, the great divide approaches. Adrian watched her carefully. How many paths do you see? Elena looked north. 1. The next morning, Elena stood beneath the moon arch for the second time, but nothing about the moment felt like her wedding day. She was not wearing another woman's expectations now. She wore a simple silver-white gown chosen for herself, while representatives from every major territory filled the royal hall. Adrian stood beside her without his crown. The crown rested on a stone pedestal between them, a symbol of authority rather than ownership. Gideon stepped forward carrying the newly recovered Pathkeeper record. Before he could speak, Adrian raised one hand. There is something this kingdom should hear from me first. The hall quieted. Adrian looked toward Elena. For years, I was taught that a king proves his strength by walking ahead of everyone else. I believed leadership meant knowing the road before others questioned it. His gaze moved across the council. I was wrong. Elena felt the room become completely still. 3 winters ago, a woman I barely knew challenged a law I had accepted without questioning its cost. I remembered her because she was brave enough to tell me what rank had prevented others from saying. Adrian turned fully toward Elena. She did not become worthy when she entered this palace. She did not become worthy when an ancient seal recognized her. She was worthy when no one important was watching. Elena's throat tightened. This was what she had needed him to understand. Adrian continued. I wanted her long before this marriage. But wanting someone does not give us the right to choose their life for them. She taught me that too. He stepped away from the pedestal, leaving Elena a clear path forward or away. Elena Whitmore, the council wishes to recognize you as Luna of Blackthorn Kingdom. I ask only one question. Is this the road you choose? Elena looked at the nobles who had expected Vivian, the ministers who had doubted her, and the king who had finally learned that love without respect could become another kind of decision made for someone else. Then she looked at Adrian. Yes, she said, but I will walk beside you. A quiet smile appeared on his face. I would accept nothing less. Gideon opened the ancient record. Then let the older title be remembered as well. Stepsister of the crown. She who walks the second path beside the king. Silver light appeared beneath Elena's feet. 2 glowing paths extended across the floor, one beneath Adrian and one beneath her. For several seconds, they remained separate. Then Elena felt the Pathkeeper gift awaken. The lines moved. Across her mind appeared the northern mountains, the hidden valley, and the forgotten territory beyond every modern border. The 2 silver paths became one. Elena's breath caught. Gideon saw the change on the floor and went pale. The Great Divide. Adrian turned toward him. What does that mean? Before Gideon could answer, another section of the ancient record began glowing. Words hidden for nearly 9 centuries appeared across the page. Gideon read them slowly. When the Pathkeeper returns and every road becomes one, the kingdom must remember the land it chose to forget. Elena closed her eyes. She sensed the distant valley again, perhaps more than 400 miles north, waiting behind mountains absent from royal maps. But this time she felt something else. People, not strangers. A forgotten branch of the same kingdom. Adrian looked at her. Is that where the path leads? Elena nodded. Yes. Then we will find out why. She opened her eyes and looked at him. No. We will find out why they were erased. The distinction mattered. Adrian understood. He offered his hand, but waited. Elena chose to take it. The marriage that began as another family's obligation had become something neither of them could have commanded, a partnership built through choice. Yet as Elena looked toward the northern windows, she finally understood the warning hidden beneath their story. Her marriage to Adrian had never been the prophecy. She tightened her fingers around his hand as the distant Pathkeeper road began glowing brighter. Adrian, she whispered, our marriage was never the prophecy. He followed her gaze toward the mountains. Then what was it? Elena felt the forgotten kingdom waiting at the end of the only road left to them. The warning.